Imagine waking up one day and realizing you've suddenly become the most popular guy in a room you weren't even invited to 10 years ago. It's a strange, almost Twilight Zone feeling. You're looking in the mirror, seeing a few more gray hairs, maybe a slightly slower metabolism. And yet, your phone is buzzing with notifications from women who wouldn't have given you the time of day when you were in your prime physical 20s. Welcome back. Here, we don't do happily ever after fairy tales or academic fluff. We navigate the raw, often uncomfortable psychology of relationships and self-development to give you actionable tools for the real world. We're pulling back the curtain on the mechanics of the dating market that no one wants to talk about, but everyone is feeling right now. There's a phenomenon happening across the board. Men in their 40s, regular, hard-working guys who aren't necessarily private jet-owning millionaires or fitness models, are suddenly receiving, "Hey, how have you been?" messages from women who treated them like background noise 15 years ago. These are the same women who spent their 20s and 30s operating on a very specific, very rigid checklist. If you weren't 6'2", pulling in $250,000 a year, and sporting a social calendar that looked like a Coachella VIP guest list, you were invisible. But now the script has flipped. Suddenly, they're the ones initiating. They're the ones being flexible with their requirements, and they're looking at you with a level of interest that feels, well, a bit suspicious. You might be tempted to think, finally, I've arrived. I've become the man. But before you let your ego take the wheel, we need to perform a reality check. Did you actually become more desirable? Or did the room just get smaller? Think about it. At 42, with a decade of corporate stress lines and a receding hairline, are you objectively hotter than the 25-year-old version of you who could run a 5K without needing a nap? Probably not. You didn't change. The market transformed. To understand this, you have to view dating not as a romantic movie, but as a marketplace. For years, the buyers, in this case, high-value young women, held all the leverage. They could demand premium organic gold for the price of a generic brand because the supply of attention was infinite. They could ghost 95% of the field and still have a line around the block. But time is a brutal auditor. Eventually, supply decreases while the demand for stability stays constant. Those sellers they laughed at years ago, they aren't on the shelf anymore. Some found other buyers who valued them early, and others simply walked out of the store. Let's look at Jessica. At 25, Jessica is the CEO of her own dating destiny. She's earning entry-level pay, driving a car that rattles over 40 miles, and living with 3 roommates. But on her phone, she's a queen. She's matching with surgeons, high-level attorneys, and guys who look like they were carved out of granite. These 35-year-old apex men take her to 5-star dinners and fly her out for weekends. This creates a massive psychological illusion. Because she can access these men, she believes she belongs to that tier. She mistakes a temporary rental for permanent ownership. She thinks, this is my baseline. Why would I ever settle for that 27-year-old guy in accounting who makes $55,000 and drives a Camry? She filters him out instantly. Too short, too boring, too average. The data from dating platforms backs this up. Most women in that peak window filter for the 6-figure club. By the time they're done clicking boxes, they've eliminated 97% of the male population. They are fighting over the same 3% of men. And here is the cold truth Jessica missed. Those top-tier men have zero incentive to commit to her. Why would they buy the house when they have a lifetime pass to the hotel? But at 25, Jessica doesn't care. She thinks she has an infinite runway. She's focusing on herself, living her best life, and assuming that whenever she decides she's ready to settle down, one of those top-tier guys will just be waiting there with a ring and a mortgage. She's betting her entire future on the idea that her market value is a permanent asset rather than a depreciating one. She doesn't realize that in 10 years, the average guy she's ignoring today will be the only one left standing, and he might not be interested in being anyone's silver medal. If you're starting to see the patterns in your own life, or noticing how the invisible men are suddenly becoming the sensible choice, you're starting to crack the code. We're just getting started on how this trap is set and why that sudden attention might be a red flag disguised as a compliment. Join a growing community of men who refuse to be a backup plan. We're building a tribe of guys who value their own worth to see the truth. Fast forward a few years, and the atmospheric pressure in Jessica's world begins to change. She hits 32. On paper, she's doing better than ever. Maybe she's cleared that $70,000 mark. She's got a better title, and her apartment finally has furniture that didn't come in a flat pack box. But the dating market has undergone a silent, brutal correction. Those high-tier men she was dating at 25, the ones with the deep pockets and the apex lifestyles, haven't gone anywhere. They're still there. But they aren't looking at Jessica anymore. They're looking at the new crop of 24-year-olds who possess exactly what Jessica used to have: a lack of cynicism, a fresh perspective on the world, and zero emotional baggage from a decade of situationships. Suddenly, the matches on her phone aren't just slowing down. They're changing flavor. The quality is dropping. The men who are pursuing her now are the ones she used to consider her floor, not her ceiling. But here's the kicker. Her standards haven't moved an inch. In her mind, she's still that 25-year-old queen who deserves the surgeon. This is where the ego protection mechanisms kick in. You've heard the anthems, "Where are all the good men?" Men are intimidated by my success. Guys today just can't handle a strong, independent woman. These aren't observations of reality. They're coping mechanisms. They are shields designed to protect her from the devastating truth that her market value has shifted, and she failed to trade her peak assets for a long-term commitment when she had the most leverage. I want to tell you about a guy I'll call David. David was the quintessential solid guy. At 28, he was making decent money in logistics. He was fit, he was loyal, and he was looking for something real. He spent 3 years trying to get the attention of a woman in his social circle. Let's call her Elena. Elena was beautiful, charismatic, and spent her time being wined and dined by guys 10 years older who never had any intention of marrying her. She told David point blank that he wasn't adventurous enough for her. Translation: he didn't have the flashy lifestyle of the guys who were currently renting her time. David took the hint, put his head down, and focused on his career. He built his value brick by brick. Now, jump to 10 years later. Elena is 38. The adventurous guys have moved on to younger models. She's staring down the barrel of a very lonely 40. And suddenly, David looks like a godsend. She reaches out to him, acting like the last 10 years of ignoring him were just a growth phase. She's suddenly very interested in his stability and kindness, the very things she mocked him for in their 20s. But David is a different man now. He's seen the world, he's grown his bank account, and he's realized that his value didn't come from her validation. He sees that she isn't choosing him. She's choosing the security he represents, because her other options have evaporated. This is the market correction in its purest form. Between 36 and 40, the biological clock stops ticking and starts sounding like a sledgehammer. The medical reality is cold. Fertility doesn't care about your girl boss era or your travel bucket list. It drops off a cliff. If she wants a family, the window isn't just closing, it's being boarded up. And the good men she's looking for? Most of them are already off the market. They married the women who saw their value when they were still ordinary. The ones who are still single are either highly cautious divorcees or they're successful 40-year-old men who have realized they can now date women in their late 20s. This creates a massive shift in leverage. At 25, she had the supply and the attention, and you had the demand. At 40, if you've built yourself into a man of substance, you have the supply, the stability, the resources, and the maturity. And she has the desperate demand. The leverage that favored her for 2 decades has finally swung your way. It's a mathematical correction that many women refuse to acknowledge until it's part of their daily reality. They realize they bet against the house, and the house always wins. They ignored the ordinary guys who would have loved them through their prime, and now they're shocked to find those men aren't waiting around to be a consolation prize. Now, let's get into the psychological weeds of what happens when one of these women finally chooses the man she used to ignore. I want to tell you about Mike. At 43, Mike is a solid guy. Stable job in mid-level management, keeps himself in decent shape, owns his own place. In his 20s, Mike was the guy women asked to help them move furniture, but never asked to dinner. He was the nice guy who lived in the permanent friend zone. He'd send out 20 messages on a dating app and maybe, if the moon aligned, get one lukewarm "hey" back. But today, Mike's inbox is a different world. He's getting messaged first by women who are accomplished, attractive, and carry impressive degrees. Mike's first instinct was to celebrate. He thought, I finally made it, and I'm finally the man women want. I had to sit Mike down and give him a dose of reality. I told him, Mike, look at yourself. You've got less hair than you did at 25. You've got more stress, and your back hurts when you sleep wrong. You aren't objectively hotter than you were 15 years ago. What changed isn't you, it's their alternatives. You see, you have to distinguish between genuine desire and pragmatic selection. When a woman who spent her youth chasing high-octane apex men suddenly finds you fascinating at 40, you aren't her dream. You're her reality. You're the safe harbor she's pulling into because her ship is taking on water and the storm is getting dark. That isn't a compliment. It's a strategy. This leads to a toxic phenomenon I call the settlement resentment. Let's look at Sarah. Sarah spent her 20s with a literal spreadsheet of requirements. He had to be 6'3", he had to drive a German car, and he had to have a passport full of stamps. She was an entry-level admin, but she felt entitled to a CEO. Fast forward to 38, and the CEOs are all married or dating 24-year-olds. Sarah finally lowers her standards and starts dating a guy like Mike. On the surface, it looks like a win for the ordinary guy, but if you look closer, the cracks are everywhere. Sarah is visibly disappointed when they go to a chain restaurant instead of the 5-star spots her exes used to frequent. She makes subtle, biting comments about his sensible sedan. She hasn't actually fallen for him. She's mourning the life she thought she was entitled to because she feels she's settled for an ordinary man. She resents him for being the evidence of her failed gamble. She looks at her friends who married their college sweethearts, ordinary guys they grew with, and she sees the beautiful homes and the teenage kids they've built together. She realizes she could have had that, but she traded her best years for experiences and adventure with men who never intended to stay. Now she's with you, and every time you don't live up to the ghost of the high-value men she used to access, she takes it out on you. You become the punching bag for her regret. You'll see this manifest in what I call the deadline push. If she's pushing for cohabitation after 3 months, or bringing up marriage and kids within weeks, she isn't in love with you. She's in a race against her own biological clock. She's operating under the desperate urgency of a closing window. She might even tell you, I usually date a different type. Or, you're not who I pictured myself with? Listen to her. She's telling you that you're a compromise. She's telling you that if a better option, the type she actually wants, showed up tomorrow, you'd be a footnote in her history. Entering a relationship where you are the best available option rather than the only wanted option is a recipe for a miserable existence. You deserve to be with someone who saw your value when it was a bargain. Or at the very least, someone who respects the man you've become without comparing you to a lifestyle they can no longer reach. And don't let the flattery of sudden attention blind you to the fact that you might just be the person filling a vacancy in someone's panic-driven timeline. As we move into the final stretch of this reality check, we have to talk about the asymmetry of aging. This is the part of the conversation that makes people squirm, because it involves hard numbers and biological facts that don't care about our modern feelings. If you're dating a woman past 40, you aren't just dating her, you're often dating her past. If she's divorced, you're inheriting a complex ecosystem of financial entanglements, child support, and the ghost of an ex-husband who still has a permanent seat at your dinner table through scheduling and co-parenting. You will always be secondary to the children, which is honorable, but you must also realize that the ex has a permanent access pass to her stress levels and her schedule. You're stepping into a movie that's already 2/3 over, and you're expected to pay for the popcorn while apologizing for a plot you didn't write. Then there is the fertility reality. It isn't politically correct to say, but it is biologically undeniable. A woman at 25 has about a 25% chance of pregnancy per cycle. By 40, that number plummets to 5%. By 45, it's less than 1%. These aren't opinions, they are the laws of nature. When a woman in this age bracket looks at an ordinary man with sudden intense interest, it's often because he represents her last chance at biological motherhood. This creates a level of desperation that can feel like passion, but it's actually panic. For you, the timeline is different. A man at 40 or even 50 can still father healthy children. This asymmetry creates a massive shift in market leverage. While her window is closing, yours is arguably wider than it's ever been, because you now have the resources to support a family that you didn't have at 22. This brings us to the ultimate strategic question. Why should you settle for being someone's fallback? Many successful men in their 40s are discovering that dating younger, say a woman in her late 20s or early 30s, is actually a much healthier dynamic. It's not just about the physical, it's about the emotional environment. A woman in her late 20s often has less cynicism and fewer emotional walls built from decades of dating disasters. She respects your success because to her, it's impressive, not just the minimum requirement. There's no biological deadline poisoning the atmosphere of the relationship. You get to be the higher value partner in a dynamic where you are genuinely desired, not just pragmatically selected because the preferred options are gone. If you're an ordinary man finally receiving the attention you deserved 15 years ago, don't let a sudden ego boost cloud your judgment. You need to be strategic. Ask yourself, is she into me, or is she into the safety I provide? Is she rushing this because of a connection, or because of her calendar? You spent your 20s and 30s grinding, being ignored, and building yourself into a man of substance. You have earned the right to have standards. You have earned the right to be the one who filters. Just because a door is suddenly open doesn't mean you have to walk through it, especially if that door was slammed in your face when you were younger and hungrier. The objective here isn't to be bitter or to reject partnership. It's to make informed, reality-based choices. You deserve a woman who chooses you because she wants you, not because the music stopped and you happen to be the only chair left in the room. Don't pledge your hard-earned resources and your future to someone who spent her best years giving those same things away to men who didn't value her, only to come to you when the bill came due. Build your life, keep your standards high, and remember that in this stage of the game, you are the one with the leverage. If this perspective hit home and gave you the clarity you needed to navigate these waters, welcome to the tribe. We are here to make sure you never have to play the role of the backup plan again. If this story changed the way you view your own value in the marketplace, please subscribe to the channel and like this video. We are uncovering the truths that society tries to keep hidden. Stand your ground and value your worth. The next chapter of your life is just beginning.